Security camera footage at a convenience store in Salt Lake City captured a man named Mark Hacking purchasing cigarettes at 1:30 a.m. standing at the checkout counter. He repeatedly looked down at his hands, examining his fingers for several seconds. No one paid attention to that action, until this small detail later became a clue that opened up a shocking murder case. A young woman suddenly disappeared while out for a morning run, and her case quickly became the focus of international headlines, while also being considered one of the most mysterious missing person cases in the city of Salt Lake. However, no one could have expected that during the search for her, a series of unbelievable lies would be exposed, along with secrets that had been buried for years and a dark double life. The victim was Lori Hacking, 27 years old, described by those around her as a calm, friendly woman who was always responsible in both her work and personal life. She worked at Wells Fargo and had gradually built a stable life for herself in Salt Lake City. To colleagues and friends, Lori was someone reliable, always keeping things organized and having a clear plan for the future. At that time, Lori was about 5 weeks pregnant, a detail that would later make the entire case particularly sensitive and deeply unsettling. Together with her husband, she was preparing to leave Salt Lake City to move to North Carolina, where the two planned to begin a completely new chapter. Lori believed this would be a significant turning point, as her husband pursued a medical career and the two of them built a more stable family life in a new environment. Because of that, she took the initiative to quit her job, put her plans for further education on hold, and devoted her full support to their shared path as a couple. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Lori clearly showed her excitement about this plan. Their apartment had almost been completely packed, with boxes arranged and ready for the move. Just a few days earlier, the two had even hosted a gathering as a way to say goodbye to friends and colleagues. To those around her, Lori was standing at the beginning of a hopeful new chapter in new life, a family in the making, and a future that seemed clearly defined. Her husband, Mark Hacking, 28 years old, was seen by family and friends as someone who was clearly on the path to becoming a doctor. He frequently talked about his studies, future plans, and the next steps in his medical career, creating the image of a person with clear direction and specific goals. To many people around him, Mark was not only a stable husband, but also an individual striving to build a future, especially as he was believed to be preparing to enter a more advanced stage of his education. In daily life, Mark maintained that image consistently. He often kept books and study materials around the apartment, appearing busy with his studies. Both families, even Lori's mother, believed that he was seriously pursuing an academic path, to the point of helping him prepare essays. Not stopping at words alone, Mark also constructed small details to reinforce his story, from talking about classes and busy schedules to outlining long-term plans after completing his training. However, as the investigation began to dig deeper into Mark's personal records, a completely different picture gradually emerged. The information he had provided over the years did not match reality. His education, his preparation for medical school, and even his career plans did not exist as he had described. Instead, Mark appeared to have maintained a different version of himself, an image carefully constructed to meet the expectations of his family and those around him. This gap between outward appearance and internal reality became a key factor in the investigation. It not only changed the way investigators viewed Mark, but also opened up a new line of analysis regarding motive. When a person has invested so much into maintaining a false narrative, what happens when that narrative is on the verge of being exposed? Mark Hacking and Lori Hacking had known each other since high school and had been married for about 5 years before the incident occurred. In the eyes of family and friends, they were a close couple, rarely having serious conflicts and moving together toward a stable future. Those around them often saw them as a familiar ideal. Two young people with clear plans, preparing to move to a new place to start a better life. Because of that, no one truly noticed any obvious signs of trouble in their relationship until the days just before Lori disappeared. The turning point began when Lori took the initiative to contact the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to verify her husband's admission status. This was not a random action, but most likely stemmed from suspicions that had built up over time. When she received confirmation that there was no record under the name Mark Hacking, Lori did not just uncover a single lie, but a sign that their entire future plan might have been based on false information. According to investigative sources and accounts from colleagues, Lori was clearly affected psychologically after learning this truth. She was said to have left her workplace in a state of stress and confusion. However, what is notable is that just a few days later, she still appeared with Mark at a farewell gathering with friends as if nothing had happened. This suggests that Lori may have been trying to remain calm or was still attempting to verify the information before making a decision. Even so, there were signs that she had begun to confront Mark directly about this issue. Statements from neighbors who reported hearing arguments on the night before Lori disappeared further reinforced the theory that the conflict had reached its peak. At that point, not only was trust in the relationship shaken, but the entire future plan, the move, the job, and even their upcoming family life was at risk of collapsing. And this confrontation between the truth and what had been hidden for years is considered one of the key factors leading to the subsequent events of the case. According to Mark Hacking's initial statement, the morning of July 19, 2004 began like a completely normal day. He said that Lori Hacking woke up very early, around 5 a.m., to go jogging in the Memory Grove area, a place she frequently visited as part of her daily routine. According to the plan, after finishing her run, Lori would return home, get ready for work, and Mark would drive her to the office at around 7 a.m. However, Mark stated that he overslept and only woke up around 8 a.m. When he woke up and did not see Lori at home, he assumed that she had returned early, gotten ready, and driven herself to work without wanting to wake him. During the time from 8 a.m. to nearly 10 a.m., Mark continued his normal routine without taking any immediate action to search or verify. It was only when he called Lori's workplace at Wells Fargo that he learned she had not shown up. This information marked a significant turning point, as it showed that Lori was not only absent from work, but also had no indication of having completed her usual morning routine. Shortly afterward, Mark became concerned and contacted the police to report his wife missing. However, from the very first hours, the story Mark provided already showed inconsistencies. When the apartment was examined, it was noted that the clothes Lori had planned to wear to work were still there, along with important personal items such as her wallet, keys, and handbag. This raised a major question. If Lori had actually gone for a run and then returned, why would she leave again without taking the essential items needed for a workday? These inconsistencies led investigators, from the outset, to re-examine the entire timeline Mark had provided and open the door to a deeper line of investigation, rather than treating it as a typical missing person case. Lori Hacking's car was found in an area she frequently visited, a detail that initially led many to believe she had indeed been there on the morning of the incident. However, as investigators conducted a more thorough examination, the picture began to change. Details that seemed minor gradually became significant when viewed as part of the overall context. Inside the car, the driver's seat position and rearview mirror were found to have been adjusted to fit someone with a larger build than Lori. This was not a random change, as such adjustments typically reflect the most recent user of the vehicle. In addition, forensic experts identified the presence of certain biological traces within the vehicle, suggesting that it may have been used in a context different from what was originally described. These details, while not sufficient on their own to form a conclusion, when combined, created an entirely new direction for the investigation. At the same time, a statement from a witness living near the residence provided another important piece of the puzzle. This person reported that the vehicle was still seen at the couple's home during the morning hours, something that did not align with the theory that it had been used early to travel to the jogging area. This discrepancy in timing was not just a minor error, but created a significant gap in the timeline that needed to be explained. At this point, police even began to question whether Lori Hacking had ever left the house for a run that morning at all. With the evidence continuing to build, investigators decided to conduct a more thorough search of the couple's apartment, this time with Mark Hacking's consent. In the bedroom, officers discovered a very small bloodstain on the bed frame and the nightstand. When checking inside a drawer, one officer found a knife still in its sheath. Upon seeing it, Mark stated that it was a knife he had kept since his time in the Boy Scouts. However, on the blade, there was a small bloodstain and a fingerprint. From that moment, police immediately requested a full search warrant and asked Mark to leave the apartment. In the eyes of those around him, Mark did not seem like someone who could be a failure. However, he continued to deny any involvement in Lori's disappearance. Even Lori's family stood by Mark and believed that he had nothing to do with their daughter's disappearance. Through the investigation, police determined that the last time Lori was seen was on Sunday night, the day before she went missing. Security camera footage at a convenience store showed Lori and Mark shopping together, appearing completely normal. However, what stood out was that after 1 a.m., Mark returned to the store alone to buy cigarettes, and Lori was nowhere to be seen. When questioned, Mark said that Lori had already gone to sleep at that time, and the answer did not seem unusual. But what they found afterward truly changed the entire direction of the investigation. They began going to the church Mark regularly attended and checked the trash bins behind it. There, they found an old mattress with its top surface deliberately cut open. It was also noted that Mark had not disposed of the mattress near the apartment, but instead transported it all the way to the church in an apparent attempt to discard it. Mark stated that Lori had been on her period, which had stained the mattress, and that was why they decided to throw it away and buy a new one. However, this explanation was not convincing to investigators, especially after police had already uncovered a series of lies that Mark had previously told others. It was clear that Mark had become the primary suspect in his wife's disappearance. However, what no one expected was that even more disturbing secrets had yet to be revealed. Everything collapsed on May 24th, days after Lori went missing. When Mark Hacking began to confess, what shocked everyone was not only what had happened that night, but everything he had been hiding for years before that. Because the truth that came to light was not a single lie, but an entire system that had been deliberately constructed and maintained over a long period of time. First, Mark admitted that he had never graduated from college as he had told his family and his wife. In reality, he had dropped out earlier but continued to pretend that he was still attending, even maintaining the habit of going to school every day to avoid suspicion. The books, materials, and study space in the apartment originally seen as evidence of diligence were in fact just props used to reinforce his story. Not stopping there, Mark had also never applied to any medical school, even though he had repeatedly claimed that he had been accepted and was about to begin his training program. He even fabricated situations such as interviews, class schedules, and transfer plans to make the story more convincing. His family and his wife fully trusted everything he said and had no reason to doubt him. In his work, Mark was also not honest about his position. He had claimed that he was involved in highly specialized activities in the field of psychology, but in reality, he only held basic support roles. The difference between what he described and the truth was not a minor detail, but a complete change in the nature of his work. In addition, Mark maintained a personal image that differed from his actual daily life. He created a version of himself that fit his family's expectations, a person with clear direction, making progress in his career, and having a stable future. But behind that image was a life that lacked the foundations he had portrayed. Instead of pursuing the academic path he had claimed, most of his time was not connected to the goals he had stated. And it was the moment Lori began to realize the truth, not just a single detail, but the entire picture that became the point from which nothing could return to how it was before. What Mark had tried to hide for years was no longer within his control. From that point on, everything that followed was no longer just an immediate reaction, but the consequence of a long chain of lies that had reached its limit. According to Mark Hacking's confession, on that night, after the conflict escalated, he caused the death of his wife inside the apartment. After that, Mark attempted to conceal his actions by removing evidence and handling related items, while also trying to separate them from the original scene. These actions were not random, but showed signs of an effort to control the situation after the incident had occurred. By the following morning, Mark began carrying out a series of actions to reinforce the story that his wife had gone missing. When viewed alongside the collected evidence, these steps indicated an attempt to reconstruct the timeline in a way that was favorable to him. From a criminal psychology perspective, some experts believe that Mark's behavior shows traits associated with narcissistic tendencies. Individuals with these traits often construct an idealized image of themselves, seek recognition, and struggle when confronted with conflicting realities. When that image is threatened, they may react in extreme ways to maintain control. However, this is only an analytical viewpoint and not an official medical conclusion. The biggest question remains motive. According to Lori Hacking's family, Even if the truth had been revealed, they believe Lori might have chosen to forgive. A relative once shared that what Lori wanted was not a perfect image, but sincerity and genuine effort. During the search, a letter was found in the apartment, believed to have been written by Lori. Its contents suggested that she was dealing with doubts and disappointment in the relationship, while also setting clear boundaries that things needed to change. This is considered one of the factors reflecting Lori's psychological state before the incident occurred. After being arrested in early August 2004, Mark Hacking was charged with murder. Despite his confession, the search for the victim's body continued for several months at the city landfill, a complex process due to the large volume of material that needed to be processed. It was not until early October of the same year that Lori's body was found. Due to the condition of the remains not being intact, some forensic details could not be determined with certainty. However, the remaining evidence was still sufficient to support the investigation and bring the case to trial. In court, Mark Hacking pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a term of 6 years to life in prison under Utah law at the time. This sentence quickly sparked public debate, and later the state's Board of Pardons and Parole decided that Mark would not be eligible for parole consideration until 2035. After the case, the legal system in the state of Utah underwent notable changes. The minimum sentence for serious murder charges was increased, and this change is often referred to as Lori's Law, as a way to commemorate Lori Hacking and what happened. On the family's side, they also made a symbolic decision to remove the surname Hacking from Lori's headstone, keeping her birth name as a way to reaffirm her identity and separate it from the person who caused the tragedy. Although the case has been legally closed, controversies surrounding Mark Hacking have not ended. During his time in prison, he was found to have participated in signing and trading items related to the case on collector platforms, an action that quickly drew strong public backlash. He later stated that he would stop this activity. However, he has continued writing about his life in prison, a personal account that has not yet been widely published. The case of Lori Hacking did not end with just a verdict, but also left a clear lesson about the consequences of prolonged deception. When small lies gradually accumulate and go beyond control, they can lead to irreversible outcomes. In Mark Hacking's case, the failure to confront the truth and take personal responsibility created a tragedy that took away a future that had not yet begun. This story is based on a real case that occurred in 2004 in Salt Lake City, aiming to provide an analytical perspective on psychology, behavior, and the consequences of seemingly small choices. This story presents a clear lesson. Honesty and personal responsibility are not only moral choices, but also the boundary between solving a problem and letting it spiral out of control. Sometimes, admitting mistakes early may be the hardest thing to do, but it is also the only way to avoid greater consequences later on. And if you are interested in stories like this where the truth is always hidden within the details, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming content.